Hello and welcome to Pod's Own Country, the Yorkshire Post's political podcast. I'm Jerry Scott, the Yorkshire Post Westminster correspondent, and I host our weekly podcast with a range of guests every week. It's been a bumpy year for Pod's Own Country since we launched right back during the 2019 election. We've had a vast array of guests on, some of which we're hoping to showcase to you today. And we reached number 7 in the government category in the Apple podcast charts this year. It's been a really great year and we hope to carry on. Hopefully this shows you a bit of what we can do.
Before we recorded, you were relating an incident from the Conservative Party conference from 2017, I think, when people will remember that speech, which made headlines for all the wrong reasons. She had a cough, I think, that left her unable to speak, and parts of the set fell off behind her. But even in what was quite a difficult moment for her, she still had the human touch, didn't she? Take us through that.
Yeah, so we've been, obviously, people probably remember that speech for, as you say, the litany of things that went wrong, all of which were just outside of anyone's control. And then after this party conference speech, there's a sort of buffet and tray of drinks laid on in the green room at the back, where the team gets together and just has a little chat afterwards. And straight after she'd come off the stage, virtually, she was in the room with us, her usual self, just taking it in her stride, having a chat, not being histrionic, not having a meltdown or anything, just being a very calm, measured presence. And she caught my eye, and I'd lent her earlier in the week. I'd lent her a suit carrier. I can't remember why she needed a suit carrier for some reason. And the first thing she said was not, oh my God, what's just happened? It was, oh, Keelan, did you get your suit carrier back? And I said, oh yes, I had. And that was just a very telling incident of her. She's not someone who puts herself first or who is ego driven, or I think most politicians who've had that experience would have understandably been in a space where they were focused on themselves and focused on the terrible thing that just happened to them.
From your perspective, how has the government handled this crisis so far?
Well, I think it's on two levels. I mean, in terms of the health impacts, it's handled it very badly. Mm-hmm. Crucially, it's lost trust. I think a mixture of confused messaging, being late onto the case, the Cummings affair was very damaging. So they've lost trust, and as a result, they're not taking the public with them. Mm-hmm. The economic policies have been, in my view, perfectly right so far. But the crucial issue is where we go next. I mean, the government has correctly taken the view that in an emergency of this kind, you need a massive help to prevent the economy going from recession to depression. You need a stimulus to get it going again, and they've been doing that. The question is going to arise about what happens in the autumn when the furlough system ends, how much support the government will continue to give to the economy, and whether we will deal with the big accumulation of debt over a sensible period, which is probably sort of 20 years, or whether the government will try to deal with it over 2 or 3 years and crashes back into very severe cuts in spending, austerity, and so on. That's the choice that's looming up in the autumn.
And that's one of the reasons, really, that I wanted to get you on today, because I really want to speak to you about the topic of austerity and really the risk of returning to it, because like you say there, we're looking at these longer term things now, aren't we, and seeing how we come out of this. I mean, what is your view, I suppose, on if we should be avoiding austerity and how we can do it if we should be?
Well, I don't quite know what the phrase avoiding austerity means, because obviously there has to be some discipline over public spending. The government can't just manufacture spending out of nothing. But what we should be avoiding is a sharp cutback, which drives us into deeper recession, creates a lot of misery and hardship on top of what already exists. So there's got to be a long-term plan.
I think it's no secret that you were, a massive part of Boris Johnson's leadership bid when he went for party leadership before. Oh God, it seems like a million years ago now, doesn't it, with everything that's happened since. And you were one of his fiercest allies. So can you give us any insight into what he really thinks about levelling up and what his kind of vision has been for the North?
Well, I think the Prime Minister, Boris, he's a good mate of mine, actually. I mean, even though sometimes I come on programmes like this and give him a bit of a hard time, we still speak every week. So he hasn't fallen out.
Still return your messages.
He is uniquely placed, having been Mayor of London, to understand the power of giving people control of their lives and, driving the economy. And in fact, of course, the whole issue, I think, of the Brexit referendum, remember that's coming up later this month, was about taking back control. So look, I know and believe that he is absolutely determined to set in train a series of events that will transform people's lives. But I think across the North, he is a mate of mine, but I'm going to tell you what I really think.
Yeah,
I just think that we're going to need to see a big change from this government, my government. Obviously, I'm a Conservative. We're going to need to see a big change from this government. It just feels to me, actually, that, with this North-South divide, it's just become such an urgent issue because of how deep COVID has sunk its claws into the North's economy. Where I live over in Lancashire in the Northwest, we've been in some sort of restrictions since March. I know Yorkshire's had loads of restrictions, the like of which haven't been seen in truth in areas like London and Cornwall and the south of England. So look, this issue, which was really important at the last election, has gone from important to urgent. And I think what we need to see from this government next year is a bit of a step change on this North-South agenda. I don't just think incremental changes here, the odd fund here to invest in towns, is going to be enough. And I think we need a bit of an attitude change. So I'll let you into a little secret. Now, I got in trouble recently for allegedly saying that people in the North preferred football to ballet. But look, I'll tell you a little secret. I do actually love the arts. In fact, I love the ballet. I haven't been to the Northern Ballet, but I really hope that they might invite me now they know who I am, but maybe not. But actually, I think factories are more beautiful than some of the buildings like Westminster Abbey.
Now, we said there about it being a year of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, but there's been a milestone in Labour as well, hasn't there? It's been 100 odd days, just as it'll be as past as we release this podcast, since Keir Starmer became leader. What has changed in Labour since then?
But I think two things that I would particularly point to in the last 100 days or so of Keir's leadership. First of all, and it should go without saying, but actually it hasn't gone without saying for the last few years, Keir Starmer has got a grip of anti-Semitism in our party. And for a party that is a party of equality and equal rights and anti-racism, to have anti-Semitism as a stain on our party was a deep shame for all of us, whatever background and religion or no religion you come from. To have anti-Semitism in your party was a cause of huge shame for very many of us. And Keir Starmer has got to grips with that. And that is very much welcome. He's made that his top priority in terms of party reform. But also, I think what people have seen of Keir, particularly at Prime Minister's questions, is somebody who is forensically on top of the detail, who will hold the Prime Minister to account, will ask the challenging questions that the country want answers to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that approach that you're talking about is definitely something that's been noticeable, that kind of collegiate, collaborative approach. As an MP who's not, you weren't just elected in December, for example, you've been around for a while. Does Labour feel like a different party under Keir than it did under Jeremy Corbyn?
I very much welcome the change that we've seen in approach under Keir Starmer for our country.
In the Conservatives' terms, cleverly, quite rightly, they spotted there were disaffected voters because of Brexit and the aftermath and what had happened in the 4 years, and said, we recognise historically that we've neglected you, and that Labour neglected you. That was the play, and it played very cleverly. And people said, okay, we've got Jeremy Corbyn as the alternative leader of the country, and we're fed up with what's been going on. We'll not only give Labour a bloody nose, but we'll give you a chance. And I know, because I've spoken to them, of people who went into the polling booth in Yorkshire and in Nottinghamshire and cried when they put their cross for the Conservative candidate. Now, that's our fault. To make people cry when they vote against you is an indictment of the political party that I love and have been a member of for over 55 years. So, we've got to look at ourselves.
Some people say that it was their parents or their upbringing or some particular writing that they discovered at university, or what was it for you that really shaped the politics you hold?
It was a combination of my own personal circumstances and a teacher who was really, really interested in history and got me to read and understand the struggle and the challenges that had come over the last 150 years in terms of making real progress and changing the world for the better, and that politics could, at its best, do that. It was a vehicle for making a difference to people. The family thing was fairly self-evident, really. I mean, my dad was killed in a works accident when I was 12. My mum had a major battle for any kind of compensation because he'd stayed on over retirement age, because there was a fixed retirement age of 65 in those days, to train other people. And although it was a nationalised industry in those days, the gas industry, they were trying to stop compensation. And then my grandfather died a couple of years later in a horrendous accident in a geriatric unit. And I just felt, I've got to make this world a better place. I've got to do something about what I feel and experience around me. And people working very hard, having jobs in those days, so people had a job, working hard with real skill, getting paid quite low wages, and having a struggle. And that's where I came from, and that's what informed my decision to join the Labour Party. And no political party is exactly right for any of us. We contribute to it. We are part of the mix. But you choose the party that reflects your values most. And mine were about mutuality and reciprocity. I realised I would only get anywhere if I worked really hard and it was down to me. But I also realised, and had this reinforced in spades over the years, you really only succeed if other people are prepared to give you a helping hand.
That's so interesting to me, and I'll tell you for why. Because I spoke to Diana Davison actually last week for the Yorkshire Post, who, for listeners that don't know, is she's 27. She's newly elected Conservative MP in the December election for Bishop Auckland. She's the first Tory MP to ever represent the seat. And actually, I
think she was at Hull University, wasn't she? She's had quite an interesting few years, one way and another.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And she's from Sheffield as well. She grew up in Sheffield. Yeah. And I think the reason that interests me is because the conversation I had with her actually was almost exactly identical to what you've just said. She had family struggles, and that shaped her politics, and that really got her into it. I think for so many people, the personal experience is so much of what our politics is, isn't it?
Yes, and it's interesting how we can have quite difficult experiences, and I know she had, and come to a different conclusion about which direction to go in. And that's part of being involved with a democracy. That's part of not, there's a lot of different ways of coming at making a difference to people's lives. Philosophically, she and I would be very different, and I'd love to have a debate with her at some point. But old codgers patronising young women in their late 20s is probably not the best idea.